So this scripture is, one of those put it on a sign at a football game, kind of shorthand, this is the gospel in a verse kind of scriptures. But if you take it out of its context, I feel like it loses a lot of its meaning. That this John 3:16 is being given in this response to Nicodemus about this idea of newness. But here's the interesting piece, is that we skip over this concept of the world, which is clearly so critical in this section. Now, the word world in Greek is kosmos. It's where we get the concept of the cosmos being the universe. It's also where we get the word cosmetic, right? And in Greek, the word cosmos, as it's used by the Greek authors prior to Jesus, like Homer, for example, it really means like the orderly structure or the ensemble. Also, the facade could be another way to say that. That which is constructed in order to make sense of things. When we think about cosmologies, right? Those are ways that humans have made sense of the world that we see. And when we think about science, we can think about this as the hypothesis. We think this is how it works. And we live into that until it doesn't work. But we're called to then reformulate our hypothesis, to reformulate our understanding of the world. The church has done a terrible job of allowing those things to change. We torture people when they don't agree with the structure that we have laid onto reality. Now, John loves the concept, the world, and uses it frequently throughout his gospel. Just as an example, Matthew uses the term cosmos 9 times. Mark and Luke use it 3 times each. Just guess how many times John uses it in his gospel alone. 78 times. It is a very important concept for John. It's used another 29 times in the 3 letters, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John. It's significant to him. And Paul uses it somewhere between 30 and 40 times, depending on whether you consider Deutero-Pauline, stuff that he probably didn't write, part of his epistles or not. It's an important concept for Paul, but it's a significant concept for John. And it really begs this question of, where have we been conditioned to see the world through a normal, traditional lens? Where have we come to just believe that this way of perceiving the world is actually the truth, rather than our projection or our way of putting it together and making sense of it? I feel like people misunderstand science so often because they think that science creates truth, but it doesn't actually create truth. Anyone that's ever studied science knows that it creates an orderly structure that helps to explain things. But what we're finding now in science is that we're getting to the point where we do not have the ability to answer the kind of questions we need to make sense. Like, particle physics is at its edge now. You know this? Like, we don't have the ability to harness enough energy to answer the questions we are able to ask now in particle physics. Until we can, capture a star and crush it ourselves, until we have these godlike abilities, we will not be able to answer some of our questions. And so we're getting to the edge of human capacity for science in certain areas, which is amazing, right? The humility that's baked into that, to realize we literally can't know. So Jesus is asking us in this text, do we really have the ability to live into newness? Are we willing and able to notice that our way of understanding reality is merely a perspective on reality rather than the truth? Or are we so committed to being able to know the truth? And for all of the critique that we could give of Nicodemus and the ways that we could look at the conversation he has with Jesus as a parody, it's actually really this really significant question. Can I really start over? Could I see the world differently? Am I able to see the world differently? After I've been conditioned for so long to see myself and other people and society in a certain way, he's really asking this vulnerable question of, I hear you saying it, I don't know if I can do it. Which is kind of a scary place to come to. See, I believe that in Jesus, we find that there is always a possibility to reorient our lives towards life, towards that newness of life. The question is, do we even have any idea what that newness of life is, what abundant life even is, so that we would know if we were oriented to it or not? Now, habits are a very hot topic in pop psychology right now. How many of you have read an article in the last year about how you can build habits to change your life, right? To change your organizational structure, to change your body, to change your relationships. Like, everybody's writing books about habits and articles and newsletters, and habits seem to be the thing that's just going to save us. We all just had better habits around recycling and eating and exercising and play and relationships. Everything would be great. Yeah, these promises are out there. But the thing about habits is that habits are really about the things you do without thinking, right? Routines are the things that you intend, you plan, you set time aside for. Habits is just the shit you do without even noticing it, right? Which is why the promise of habits is so powerful, because what if you just were on autopilot and you did everything right? Well, that sounds great. Until you start thinking about what is it like to live your life on autopilot. Right, and who decides what's right? Who's programmed, right? But the reality is that we do live a great deal of our life on autopilot. I mean, like, think about driving. How many times have you driven 30 miles and then you notice that you've just driven 30 miles, right? Your mind goes elsewhere. Your body's like, I know how to do this. We're good, right? So much of our life, we live in these autopilot places of our habits. And those autopilot things are powerful things to notice, but so often they're invisible to us. I mean, how many of you really know what your real habits are? And what allows you to notice them? Often it's when they bump up against some part of our life that doesn't really work. And Jesus is really interested in, what are your habits in terms of how you look at other people? Are you aware of your prejudices and judgments, of the things that you notice subconsciously or semi-consciously that you lay layers of meaning onto people? I mean, do you notice people's shoes and make meaning out of that? That's an important one for some folks. It's got a lot of meaning to it. It's got a lot of value, and you lay some assumptions on it. I remember somebody counseling me once. I never give money, and you should never give money to anyone who's begging on the side of the road if they have nicer shoes than you. I thought, well, okay, thanks for your input. But of course, right, there's all of this meaning and value that's presumed there. And how easily does that take you out of the moment? My wife has constantly encouraged me when we're walking and someone's asking for money to listen to the Spirit. Am I being called to give by something greater than this person's appearance? There's something greater than my own judgment. And to pay attention to that. Am I making space for Spirit to be active in here, or is it just my judgment that I'm living out of in the world? And how often we turn those same things on ourselves? What's the view that we take of our own self, of our own body, of our own way of being, our own life and relationships, our own reactions and responses? Because I believe that it is always possible to reorient towards life. We have to notice where we're oriented, and we have to notice where is life and where is it not. And I really think that ultimately the thing that's going to break us of these things is when we get into trouble, when things don't go well. Because our habit is just going to be a habit that's just going to work and work and work until it doesn't, until we bump up against something. And do we pay attention? Do we allow that to be a place that gives us information? You know, Jesus, in the midst of this speech to Nicodemus, says, "And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that all who look to him will have eternal life." And it begs this question for us in progressive Christianity, which is answered in a lot of other kind of interpretations, other lenses of Christianity. What's the redemption that's found in the suffering of Jesus? Is there new life found there at the cross? The place of shame, of torture, of suffering, of pain and humiliation. And not just in his cross, but in the places where we in our own lives experience pain and suffering and humiliation and degradation. Places where it's not working for us. And I think about the places where those experiences and challenges really invite us into who are we really, right? Our integrity. Some people say that integrity is who you are when other people aren't looking. I think integrity is who are you when you're losing? Who are you when it's not going well? Who are you when you're in pain, when you're afraid, when you're betrayed? And thinking about Jesus as an example or a model, to me, so much of the theology of the cross is about how do we move through those experiences and what do they teach us about us? Are we allowing ourselves to learn from them, to realize something about us? And really Jesus asks us, who are you going to be when things get hard? This is the question he was asking again and again to his disciples. Who are you going to be when things get hard? Because I think there's that possibility of newness when things get hard. There's a possibility to recognize our habits, our presumptions, our ways of understanding reality and say, you know, that's not working for me anymore. But how do we find that orientation to the new, to the good, to the growth, to the life? You know, I think about the tree growing, and there's a part of it, like trees are amazing, right? Because they'll just grow in every direction. How many of you have a tree somewhere that is just, you need to get out there and prune it because it is just going in all kinds of directions, right? It will overlap in itself. It'll literally strangle off its own branches just trying to grow, grow, grow. But when it gets to a point where it's like, where is it? There. That's in the sun. That one's not. You know what it'll do? It'll just let go. It'll say, we're not going to send energy there anymore. We're going to keep sending energy over here where there's life and light and energy, and we're just going to stop doing this. How many of us are still trying to grow over here? Still trying to make this work? Still trying to manhandle reality? Instead of just allowing, where is there energy and life and growth and letting go of this? But we have a hard time letting go because this was the truth, man. This was the world. This is how we understood everything. It's not working, but I bet I can make it work. And what's it going to mean about me if I stop? What's it going to mean about me if I admit that's not working for me anymore? Right? Trees don't care. They're just saying, here's life, here's energy, here's growth. I'm going to do this. I'm going to let this go. I hope it doesn't fall on anybody, but he talks about light here. He talks about light, and we can read this as the judgment. Right? And it even says, this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world. But we remember that just before this, he said that the Son of Man did not come to the world to condemn the world, but that through him the world might be saved, rescued from danger. That the orderly structure, we're not here, Jesus isn't here to tell everybody that they're doing it wrong, that they've missed the mark, they're not understanding that the world is actually different, and I can get you to the truth if only you would X. It's more like some of this stuff that we've come to believe, it's not working for us. I'm not here to condemn you for growing in the wrong direction. I'm here to rescue you, to get you back into the light. But if we're going to change our patterns, if we're going to change our habituated ways of being, we first have to see them. They have to show up in the light. And being good is never going to allow us to do that. Because that place that isn't growing, that place that isn't full of life, the place that's hurting us, well, if we're good people, then those things don't exist. So we're just going to keep pushing on that and get it to work. Right? The problem of being right is that we have to be static. So what are we going to be instead? We're going to be full of life and love. We're going to be oriented towards growth, and anything oriented towards growth is able to let go of that which isn't serving anymore. Is able to say, this, right now, today, this is good and full of healing and hope and power. This gives me peace. It is always possible to reorient towards life. It is always possible, at no matter what age and stage you're at, to find that this habit, this way of being, this understanding of reality, it's not working. And the amazing thing about Jesus is he always set it up to say, you know what, no matter what, you're always welcome back. If you taste and see that life and growth and love is good, then just come. Come to the table that I've already prepared for you. You are always welcome back. There is always newness of life. But the question is, do we know, have we felt what abundant life really is for us? And given ourselves over to hunger for that enough that we can let go of this stuff that's not serving us anymore?